It's no secret that VPNs are one of the most heavily shilled pieces of technology in current year. You might have even gotten a VPN ad for this video. And it actually makes a little bit of sense why they are so popular, because these days people are actually becoming more concerned with their online privacy. Some people want to avoid being tracked by corporations or their ISP that might try to track all their online activity and then sell that data to ad companies. Other people are concerned about hackers stealing all of the money out of their bank account or leaking embarrassing photos of them online. So what's the best way to deal with this? Usually, this is the part where I would start shilling you a VPN, telling you that they have military-grade encryption and a state-of-the-art data center, and that you can have this security for 20% off if you use my promo code randomeceleb25. But the truth is, 99% of what you've heard about VPNs is total nonsense. It is scare tactics and fear-mongering to get you to buy a product that you don't need. Most of the connections that you're making to websites are already secure. If you're using HTTPS, if you've got that little lock pad next to the URL, then you are making a secure encrypted connection with that website. Nobody can see your username and password, nobody can see how much money is in your bank account or steal any of it from you, even if you're using some spooky public airport or cafe Wi-Fi. They could see what websites you're going to, so if you wanted to hide the fact that you're going to Cornhub from your network administrator or your ISP, then you could use a VPN for that. But then you're just shifting the burden of trust from your ISP to your VPN company. And a lot of VPN companies are pretty shady. Two that stand out to me because of how frequently I've seen them shilled on social media are ExpressVPN and Private Internet Access, both of which are owned by Cape Technologies, which used to go under the name Crossrider. And before that name change, they were involved with propagating a lot of malware and adware. You know, the kind of things that VPNs are advertised as a remedy for. So if these unsafe, unencrypted connections that VPNs are supposed to protect you against are a big nothing burger, what is the legitimate purpose for using a VPN? Changing your IP. That's honestly one of the most useful features that I can think of offhand that VPNs offer, because they are making a request to websites and passing that information back to you, and because of that, the IP of the VPN is what shows up. Now, this can actually be handy in some cases. It could help with avoiding targeted ads because sometimes they use your IP address to track who you are. But there's many other methods that ad companies use to show you ads, like your browsing session. And really, if you don't want to see ads, then ad block is the real solution for you. It's right there in the name. Since a VPN can prevent websites or link grabbers from getting your real IP, that could be useful for some people like Twitch streamers, I guess. It could prevent someone from getting your IP and then DDoSing you. It could also be useful to watch region-locked content. Say, if you wanted to watch Netflix UK, you could just connect to a VPN that's in the UK, and now it looks like you are making these requests in the UK. But there's a flaw with doing this. All of the IPs that these different VPNs use are public, so it's very trivial for a website to figure out whether or not you're using a VPN and visit it. And then from there, it's up to the person running that website or that service to decide what to do. Some might decide to block you or deprioritize your connection because you're using a VPN. Like if you're using one to avoid ads, then presumably that means whoever's running this service is making less money on your connection, so they could just throttle the bandwidth to your connection if you're using a VPN. And you also have to remember that you're sharing these VPN servers with everybody else that has signed up for it. And some people actually use these VPNs for malicious activity, which is another reason that some people may choose to block VPN IPs. I've actually seen this happen a lot when it comes to different online game services, where somebody who's cheating in the game is going to use a VPN to keep coming back every time they get banned, and so they decide, hey, I'm just going to ban every IP address that belongs to a VPN. That way hackers don't come in here and keep ruining the fun over and over. Which brings me to private VPNs, or PVPNs. This is going to be a VPN that you set up yourself with its own IP address, which is going to give you far more control over it, and you don't have to worry about whether or not the VPN company is spying on you, or if they're keeping logs, or if they are really secure, because you are going to be your own VPN company. It's going to be as secure, private, and anonymous as you want it to be. Because not all VPNs are created equally. There's several different protocols that are available for setting up VPNs, and since the VPN is ultimately just another computer that's acting as a middleman for your web activity, the security of that computer matters as well. What operating system is it running? Is it properly configured by modern security standards? There's been several cases where VPN companies have actually been hacked, so you shouldn't just assume that because VPN companies are essentially advertising a security product that they themselves are following good security practices. So let's get started. For this video, I'm going to be using a VPS for my VPN. Now, there's some pros and cons to doing this kind of setup. The pros being that they are very easy to set up because you don't have to go and physically turn on a computer and install an operating system to it. You can do all of that through your browser or through the command line. And it's really easy to have your VPN be in different countries or to just replicate it and have multiple ones in multiple different countries to access region lock content. But this VPS is not under your physical control. So any kind of surveillance or infiltration that could be done with physical access to the box can't really be mitigated. So you are putting some trust in your VPS provider. But for this video, the trusted VPS provider I'm going to use is vultr. And if you're interested in using them as well and getting some discounts for your account, I have a referral link in the description of this video. It also puts some credit onto my vultr account, so I would really appreciate it if you use that. So now let's pick out the VPS that we're going to use. I'm going to use cloud compute. It doesn't have to be a super powerful computer. You don't need to have a whole lot of CPU, RAM, or memory for it. You do want to make sure that your bandwidth is high enough for whatever you're going to be doing, and I consider 2 terabytes to be enough for that. For the operating system, I'm also going to be using Debian, and we can go ahead and deploy. All right, so our box is spun up. I'm going to go ahead and SSH into it, SSH root at the VPN's IP, and then it's going to tell you to put in the password. You can just copy the default root password from here. And there we go, I'm on. So anytime you access one of these systems for the first time, you should always update all of your packages. So I'm going to sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. All right, and everything is up to date. Now we're going to set up our user because we really don't want to be accessing this box as root. So we're going to go ahead and user add and then you can just go ahead and put in whatever username you want to use. Then we're going to set a password for the user, so PASSWD, your username. And then we're going to add them to the wheel group. Actually, on Debian, by default, you don't have a wheel group. You technically don't have to do things this way, but I'm just used to setting it up this way. So you can group add wheel to create the wheel group, and then you can do usermod g wheel and make sure it's a capital G, username to add that person to the wheel group. And then the last thing that we want to do is edit our sudoers file. Because by default, Debian doesn't have this line here, wheel all equals all. Pretty much just want to copy this to be the same way. And so what this is going to do is every user that is in the wheel group is going to have access to sudo as long as they use their password. Okay, so now we are able to switch to our new user. And the one that I made in this case is Kenny. So now what we want to do is secure SSH, because there's a few things that we're doing right now which are not best practice, like using SSH as root and also using password authentication instead of key-based authentication. So if you don't have an SSH key already, I'm going to show you how to generate one. So I'm going to switch tabs to my local host. So this is not a remote computer. This is my local one, my desktop that's right in front of me. CD into your .ssh folder, and if you don't have one for some reason, you can just go ahead and create one. And the command to generate our key is ssh keygen, and I'm going to use RSA with 4096 bits. So now it's going to tell us to name it. I do recommend naming them because by default it's just going to make it ID_RSA, and if you're going to use multiple SSH keys, which is recommended if you're accessing many different servers, then you should definitely name them so that you can keep track of them. So I'm just going to name it VPN. And then we're going to enter a passphrase to use for this. Then we're going to enter it again. And there we go, our key is generated. Okay, so now what we need to do is copy this debvpn.pub that we just created to our remote VPS. Now there's a few different ways you could do this. You could technically just cat it out and then copy and paste the text from it, but we want to do it the big brain way, which is to use secure copy. So we're going to scp debvpn.pub to Kenny. You want to make sure that you're copying this to the user you just created on the remote VPS, not root. So it's going to be Kenny at, and then this IP, and then a colon at the end. And then it's going to prompt us to enter our password. And there we go. So it's pushed this onto the remote server, and sure enough, if I cd into home Kenny, and now if I ls, you can see that I have this debvpn.pub here in my home folder. So now, actually I think I need to make an SSH folder as well. Yes, I do. Okay, so now we're going to create the SSH folder, mkdir.ssh, so same way it is on your local host, but we're also going to touch.ssh, and I believe it's called authorized keys with an underscore instead of a space. Then we're going to cat out debvpn to that file that we just created. So now authorized keys has the contents of debvpn, and then we'll go ahead and delete it because we don't need it anymore. All right, now let's edit the config for our SSH daemon at etc ssh sshd config. All right, so there's a few things that we need to change in here. Permit root login, we're going to change that to no, so root SSH will not be possible. Here we go, pub key authentication. We're going to change, well, actually it was already correct, I just had to uncomment it. So pub key authentication, you want that to be yes. Challenge response authentication, no. And I was looking for the password authentication now. Okay, here we go. Change password authentication to no. And if you want, you could change the port. This isn't really a security configuration. I guess some people consider it security through obscurity, but that's not real security anyway. What changing the port can help with is it can keep your security logs a little bit more straightforward, because in case you didn't know, there are bots that basically scan the entire internet for IP addresses, and they try to log into all of them on the default SSH port with the default credentials. So they're not going to be able to get in because obviously we're using public key authentication now, but it can just keep it simpler because you're going to see a bunch of people trying to get in, and changing this port is going to make it so they can't even make a connection to you. So change that if you want to. And one other thing that we need to uncomment is this authorized keys file. So this is where the keys are stored, and I think I did actually end up spelling it correctly. Let's see, I'm going to right quit this, And yeah, authorize keys. And now we just need to restart our SSH daemon. So sudo systemctl restart sshd. Okay, so now if I exit out of this box and I try to SSH back into it, oh, actually, I need to change to Kenny. And another thing that I need to do, and you might also have to do this if you didn't just create a very generic key name, is use the I parameter to specify where your key is. I think you only have to do this the first time you log in. So it's in .ssh and it's deb VPN, not the public, just regular old deb VPN. And also, if you decided to change your port, you're going to need to add the -p and then specify whatever port you put over there. But I didn't decide to do that. So I'll SSH, and then it tells me to enter the passphrase for the key. And boom, I'm logged into it now using public key authentication. Okay, now that our box has some pretty decent security, let's go ahead and set up the VPN. So like I said earlier, there are several different protocols that you could use, and the one that I'm going to use in this video is Openvpn. Now, this is by no means the most secure VPN setup. That title would probably go to WireGuard, but since WireGuard is barely 5 years old, it isn't even compatible with as many operating systems or applications as Openvpn is. But maybe I'll do a WireGuard setup in a different video. Let's go ahead and get started by installing Openvpn. And I'm going to be using this configuration script to set up Openvpn faster. This is meant for Linux distros. As far as I know, it hasn't really been tested and doesn't necessarily work on OpenBSD. Yeah, it gives us the list of distros and different architectures it's been tested on. So yeah, we'll go ahead and download this. It is best practice to read through any scripts that you're going to be running on your box. So I guess you can go ahead and do that. It is about, let's see, it's about 1,000 lines of shell code. So as long as you know Bash well enough or shellcode well enough, you should be able to look through this and figure out whether there's any malware in it or not. So since we just need this one file, we can go ahead and click into the raw and copy this link. And we can do curl LJO, all caps, paste in that link, and bam, it downloads this Openvpn install script for us. Then we want to change it to make it executable, and then run it as root. So it's pretty straightforward. It automatically detects what your public IP address is. So you could just verify that this is correct. It actually will tell you right in your vultr console what the public IP is. So I know that this is correct. And it's checking for IPv6 connectivity, and I don't have it. So we'll just hit no on that. And I'm going to use the default port for Openvpn. You could change this here if you wanted to. Say, for example, if the reason you're setting up a VPN is because VPNs are blocked on your network, this might be a way for you to get around that. And we want to use UDP since that's faster. And for our DNS, I'll just go ahead and use AdGuard. That's the default one and sounds pretty good to me. And do you want to use compression? No. And we're not going to customize our encryption settings. And then hit enter. And now it wants us to create a client name. So this is going to be basically the name of a file that you're going to download onto the client, which is the computer you're going to connect to this VPN. So I'll just call it desktop since that's what I'm going to be using. And I'll go ahead and use a passwordless client for now. Okay, and so it tells us that it's been written to our home folder. Sure enough, if I ls, you can see this desktop.ovpn. So now we just have to download this to our client. So our configuration on the server is almost done, but right now it is configured to keep logs. And we probably want to change that so that we can be one of those no-log VPNs. So we need to open up our Openvpn server.conf file, and you want to change this verb3 to be verb0. And then we're going to systemctl restart OpenVPN. Oh, we have to run this as root also. And there we go. Okay, so now if I come over here to my terminal window, we want to sftp, and I need to again specify the key file, debvpn, and we're going to do Kenny at, copy the IP address, and then enter the passphrase. Nope, that's not it. There we go. So now we could see that I'm in the box, and to download this, you just do get desktop ovpn, and then you can exit, and now it is here in my home folder, or whatever folder you did the sftp command from. Okay, so now we're ready to connect to our VPN. So we just have to sudo openvpn, and of course you have to install openvpn to the client machine as well. Config desktop.ovpn. All right, so the sequence is completed, and if I come over here to my browser and I search what's my IP, I get the IP of my VPN. And let me just go into here to prove it to you guys. See, it thinks I'm over here in Los Angeles when really I'm in Massachusetts. I'm way over here on the other side of the country. So there you go. That's how you can set up your own VPN. And of course, since you have your own IP, it shouldn't be banned from any kind of services. I guess theoretically, they could tell that you have a vultr IP or an IP with whatever VPS you're using. So as long as they don't have that VPS blanket banned, then you should be able to access whatever kind of service was originally blocking your VPN with this new VPN.